or day 8? What day is this? 8. Day 8, inshallah. Today, inshallah, we will talk about 2 ayah of Surah al-Mulk, verse number 13 and verse number 14, inshallah ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير. Yesterday we talked about the verse number 12 in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after describing the hellfire and the punishment of the hellfire, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says regarding the believers that those who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without seeing Him and they fear Him, they have khashya of Allah, they fear Him, for them there is maghfirah, for them there is forgiveness and a great reward. Now, after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَسِرُّ قَوْلَكُمْ أَوْ اجْهَرُوا بِهِ. Whether you keep your speech, whether you keep your talk secret, hidden, or whether you keep it open and known to people and publicize your speech and your talk, whether you keep it secret or you keep it public, Allah knows well what lies in the hearts. Allah knows well what lies in the heart. Right? أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. Does He who created not know while He is the subtle, al-Latif, al-Khabir, the most aware? This verse number 14, Mufti Taqi Uthmani Hafidhahullah, he translates this beautifully as, is it imaginable that He who created them will not have such a knowledge while He is the knower of the finest of things, the all-aware, right? Al-Qadir is also Al-Alim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Qadir. That's something that is established in verse number 1 of Surah al-Mulk. And all of these subsequent verses are the manifestations of the power and qudra of Al-Qadir. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching the people or informing the people His attribute of knowledge. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possesses the knowledge of even things that are hidden from the people, that people try to keep it secret, right? Where do we keep our secret? In close gatherings, in our hearts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Latif. He knows the subtle realities of everything. Nothing can be hidden from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So this is the power of Al-Qadir. Al-Qadir is Al-Alim. The Creator has to be Al-Qadir, the most powerful, and that demands that He has to have the attribute of the perfect knowledge, all-knowing. Now in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word asirru, and asirru is the word of command. But here, the word of command is being used as a word of khabar, to inform of something, right? And the khabar is that whether you keep something secret, whether you keep your speech secret or manifest or public, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows it all, what you carry in your heart. Nothing can be hidden from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abu Ishaq al-Isfaraini, rahimahullah, he stated that from Allah's noble attributes regarding ilm, knowledge, are al-alim, ta'mimu jami' al-ma'lumat. Allah's attribute, al-alim, means that Allah knows everything. His knowledge is all encompassing. His knowledge is all encompassing. Jami' al-ma'lumat. It's inclusive of everything, generality. He possesses the knowledge of everything. Al-Khabir, that's another attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيَخْتَصُّ بِأَنْ يَعْلَمَ مَا يَكُونَ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَكُونَ. So Al-Alim attribute is general, all encompassing knowledge. Al-Khabir is specific. He knows exactly, precisely what will happen before it happens. Al-Alim knows everything. Al-Khabir knows before it happens. Right? Allah is the knower of everything. Right? أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. Does He who created not know while He is the subtle Al-Latif and Al-Khabir, the all-knowing? See, in English we will just translate as all-knowing, all-aware. Right? But the depth of this word cannot be articulated in the English translation. Right? Al-Khabir is one who has precise knowledge. Al-Alim has overall encompassing knowledge. Al-Khabir has precise knowledge, macro and micro, right? The way we use macro and micro. Allah has macro knowledge and micro knowledge. Allah knows things before they even happen, right? We think and we plan, and we do not articulate it to anybody. We keep it hidden in our heart. But who knows? Allah knows. Al-Khabir. He's Al-Khabir. He's Al-Khabir. What is hidden is in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's attribute of Al-Khabir. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge and ilm is also coming from the attribute of Al-Hakim. He said, وَمِنْهَا الْحَكِيمُ وَيَخْتَصُ بِأَنْ يَعْلَمَ دَقَائِقَ الْأَوْصَافِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possesses perfect wisdom, and His hikmah, His attribute of Al-Alim, connects with His attribute of Al-Alim and His attribute of ilm. How? He's a possessor of perfect wisdom, and He knows the minutiae details. He knows daqaiq, He knows minutiae details, right? The subtle realities, the characteristics, to the minute level, right? Allah knows it all. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-shaheed, وَيَخْتَصُ بِأَنْ يَعْلَمَ الْغَائِبَ وَالْحَاضِرَ وَمَعْنَاهُ أَلَا يَغِيبُ عَنْهُ شَيْءٍ. Allah is present and Allah is witness of everything. Everything is in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing is hidden from Him, because He is ash-shahid. He's witnessing all of it, right? And He is the witness. He witnesses that which is apparent, and He also witnesses that which is non-apparent, hidden and secret. He witnesses it all, right? Nothing escapes the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then He said, وَمِنْهَا الْحَافِظ وَيَخْتَصُ بِأَنَّهُ لَا يَنْسَى. Whatever knowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possesses, He does not forget. And that's the power of Al-Qadir. How can the deity, the creator of the universe, be all-powerful and then be forgetful? That forgetfulness cannot be an attribute of God. It's not possible, right? Forgetfulness is an attribute of the creation. It cannot be the attribute of the creator, because the creator by definition needs to be perfectly powerful, all-powerful, Al-Qadir. And Al-Qadir necessitates that He, the creator, the being, the Khaliq, must be Al-Hafiz, the one who remembers. La yansa, He does not forget, right? So whenever we do something, Allah knows it. Allah remembers it, the good and the bad. When we commit a sin, Allah knows it, and Allah remembers that. Allah does not forget the zulm that we commit upon ourselves or upon others. At the same time, Allah does not forget the little things we do out of our sincerity towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah remembers that as well. And with that, we have another attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ash-shakur. Allah is very grateful, appreciative. So when we do a little bit of action to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah appreciates that, ash-shakur, right? So nothing escapes from the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And last attribute that Abu Ishaq mentioned, rahimahullah, was وَمِنْهَا الْمُحْصِي. One of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is connected with His knowledge and His attribute of Al-Alim is Al-Muhsi. Al-Muhsi is the one who counts. Al-Muhsi is the one who counts. And He said so beautifully, He said, وَيَخْتَصُ بِأَنَّهُ لَا تَشْغَلُهُ الْأَكْثَرَةُ عَنِ الْعِلْمِ مثل ضوء النور واشتداد الريح وتساقط الأرواق ويعلم عند ذلك أجزاء الحركات في كل ورقة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Muhsi, the one who counts. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala count? Counts everything. In the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the count of everything. The count of the creation that He has created. If we start counting the limbs and body parts, we will get exhausted and we will make error while counting our own bodily parts, right? First of all, we have to cut ourselves open and then they will be dead, right? But the number of bones that we have, okay, we can still count the number of bones that we have because we have a set number of bones. Biology, the science of biology has progressed so much, mashallah. When you go to the med school, you learn that skeleton and the muscles, you have all the details now laid out, right, mashallah. So, okay, we can assume that there's nothing that is missed from the human body now. Each muscle is named and counted for, and each bone is counted and named after, right? So, okay, how many bones and muscles are there on earth right now? We cannot count that. We don't have exact number of population of human beings on earth right now. We have an estimate, but we don't have the exact number. Who knows the exact number of human beings alive right now? Allah knows, because He's Al-Muhsi, the one who counts. Who knows the number of human beings that were born on earth and then they have died? Allah knows, Al-Muhsi. It's in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Al-Alim, because He is Al-Muhsi. His knowledge is so all-encompassing that He is also the counter of the things. Abu Ishaq mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, managing the affairs of the universe, does not distract Him from possessing the minute knowledge within His kingdom. Absolute control over His kingdom. That's the definition of Al-Qadir. Al-Qadir, how can Al-Qadir be all-powerful if He does not know the count of the subjects that are within His kingdom? So Al-Qadir knows each and every subject of His kingdom. He's Al-Qadir, the absolute powerful, absolute control, has absolute dominion over His entire kingdom. Allah provides light, brings strong winds, and causes the leaves to break from the trees and fall. He knows the quantity of the leaves. He knows the quantity of the movement of those leaves. He knows the number of movements of these leaves, and the number of movements they make on the tree, and the number of movements they make after they fall from the tree. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's Al-Muhsi, the one who counts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Alim, Al-Hafiz, Al-Muhsi, Al-Qadir, Al-Shaheed, right? Al-Khabir. All of these different attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are connected with His attribute of ilm. Jazakumullah khair. Ala ya'lamu man khalaqa wa huwa al-latif al-khabir. Does He who created, He would not know, while He is the subtle Al-Latif and Al-Khabir, the one who has precise knowledge, the precise ilm, the precise information of everything before it even happens, right? That's Al-Khabir. Now, what is Al-Latif? That's one attribute that we have. Inshallah, we will finish with that. Al-Latif is the one of the divine name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, noble attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that reflects His subtle nature. Al-Latif, in two aspects. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's extensive knowledge, namely Him being fully aware of everything that happens, the hidden secrets and the apparent, the hidden and the public, the secret and the public. Everything is in the knowledge of Al-Latif. And His finesse in dispensing mercy to His creation, His subtleties in dispensing mercy to His creation. When Allah decides to be merciful upon His slave, His mercy manifests in ways that we do not know where it came from. It surprises us that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed His mercy upon us. It comes upon His slaves in subtle ways. The mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes, and the person does not even realize that the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is coming until they pay attention to it, and then they realize, subhanallah, we're breathing the air that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. Our lungs are pumping. We don't have to work hard for it. Imagine if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made lungs subjected to our control, and we go to sleep, we all be dead. We can't go to sleep if lungs are dependent upon us and our consciousness. Our own lungs are not in control of our own self. Imagine our heart, if it was under our control. It's not. We go to sleep and our heart is beating. We go to sleep, our lungs are pumping, right? Allah is in control of the heart and the lungs. This is from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we do not pay attention to that. We do not reflect upon these things, right? This is Al-Latif, the one who possesses knowledge, and it manifests His mercy. He manifests His mercy in very subtle ways, right? And this shows that Allah is the creator of the actions of human beings as well, because everything happens according to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Before even they actually happen, before they transpire, Allah knows that this will happen. So our actions are in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our good actions and our evil actions, both are in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our actions are the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do our actions, the good and bad, because Allah allows it to happen. There's nothing we can do that and catch off guard Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, that cannot happen. Allah knows before we do an action. And Allah also knows before we actually do it, because we're planning in our heart. What is our heart thinking and desiring? Allah knows this all. The only reason that we are able to do the action is because Allah is allowing it to happen. And imagine if we overcome with the desires and we want to commit a sin, right? And our heart and mind are thinking about this sin. Everybody thinks that, this person is such a good person. But what this person is thinking and his heart is feeling, only that person knows, right? And then before this person actually acts upon their sin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes that person to task. Does that happen? That does not happen. Why? Because it's from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah knows that this slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be ungrateful and commit sin and defy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yet Allah allows that to happen. Allah allows that to happen. Why? Because He's Al-Latif. His mercy descends upon His slaves subtly, right? And that grants us an opportunity to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in seeking forgiveness. That allows us the time frame to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in forgiveness. And that's what the verse number 12 mentions. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَيْبِ لَهُمْ مَغْفِرَةٌ وَأَجْرٌ كَبِيرٌ. Indeed, those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without seeing Him, for them there is forgiveness and a great reward. Right? So, dear brothers and sisters, this month of Ramadan is a beautiful month in which we can reconnect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are we using this month to our benefit, or we are wasting it? That's something we need to reflect. One week has passed by. We are almost on the 9th Taraweeh tonight, or the 10th Taraweeh. The first half, the 1/3 of the month of Ramadan is almost gone. Where do we stand? Are we still the same kind of believers that we were before the month of Ramadan? Before the month of Ramadan was announced, the things that we were doing, is that what we are doing right now? We need to think about those things. Or has something changed? Our sinful lifestyle, our sinful habits, did they decrease? Are we actively pursuing, exerting effort upon ourselves to reduce those sins and bad habits and get rid of them from our lifestyle? We need to think about that. Are we building khashiyah and taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our lives in this month of Ramadan? This is something for us to reflect. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.